D-Day was a huge undertaking that took many months to plan and execute. This short documentary tells the story of how the operation was planned, calculated, prepared for, and ultimately decided. The men that made this operation possible will go down in history as some of the greatest military minds in the world. And it all started in one room. The conference room is where the great Allied commanders and leaders gathered, including Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, U.S. First Army, Admiral Sir Abraham Ramsey, Naval Commander-in-Chief, Air Chief Marshal Sir Trafford Lee Mallory, Lieutenant General Walter Bedwell Smith, Chief of Staff, General Sir Bernard Montgomery, Commander, 21st Army Group, All Allied Land Forces, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander, Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Tedder, Deputy Supreme Commander, and another 138 important men that would ultimately decide the fate of Europe. But to even start their planning for the invasion, they had to choose where they would do it, which they decided was a beach landing at Normandy. Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword would be the designated landing zones for the Allied landings. There were many factors in this invasion. 1. They had to keep their plans secret so the enemy could not prepare ahead of time. 2. The amount of supplies for the troops, ships, and assault vehicles had to be put into account and prepared. And lastly, they had to assess the coastal winds and forecasts to plan an acceptable invasion day. Sir Bernard Montgomery addresses the room. I have 4 armies under my command, 2 to lead the attack and the other 2 to secure the beachhead. We must blast our way on shore and get a good lodgment before the enemy could bring sufficient reserves to turn us out. Armored columns must penetrate deep inland, and quickly, on D-Day. This will upset the enemy plans and tend to hold them off while we build up strength. We must gain space rapidly, and peg out claims well inland. The Bay of Seine was designated the invasion site 1 year earlier with its access of more than 200 fighter airfields from England and for its flat sandy beaches, which was close to the port of Cherbourg, a critical port needed to transport supplies. The overall plan was to have the British and Canadian Second Army deal with the main force of the German Army and have the American First Army surround Cherbourg. 3 weeks later, Patton's Third Army would thunder into France, capturing more ports, and then wheel back to the River Seine around D+90, which France would hopefully be liberated by then. The plans to make this happen were assigned to SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. The British Empire's casualties now exceeded 500,000. The 16 divisions to be committed under Montgomery, including the Canadians and Poles, amounted to Churchill's last troop reserves. There were 3 levels of combat: quiet, normal, intense. But with the estimated casualty rate, planners added a double intensity as they anticipated the carnage of Normandy to be massive. American casualties were projected to reach 12% of the assault force on D-Day. The 1st Infantry Division estimated their casualties to reach 25%, and admirals told their captains they might lose 1/3 to half of their ships. Exercises did not go so well, as there were many mistakes made and lots of confusion of watercraft that they were almost charged with misbehavior in the presence of the enemy. And one of their practices were ambushed by German U-boats with such violence that unharmed vessels believed they were hit. 700 men died in that practice operation, and for now this incident remained a secret. 1.5 million men have poured into Britain since January. Out of the 89 divisions, 20 could be found in the United Kingdom, with 37 more en route. Few of the soldiers profess to be warriors or even natural soldiers. As an officer once said, their approach to soldiering was aggressive but necessary. The soldiers boarded troop trains to be transported to 1,200 camps and 133 airfields across the British Isles. Nearly 400,000 prefabricated huts and 279 tents had to be erected to accommodate the American troops, supplementing 112,000 British buildings and 20 million square feet of storage space. The material for the invasion was immense. The U.S. alone accumulated 301,000 vehicles, 1,800 train locomotives, 20,000 rail cars, 2.6 million small arms, 2,700 artillery pieces, 300,000 telephone poles, and 7 million tons of gasoline, oil, and lubricants. 60 million K rations were enough to feed the invaders for a month, and SHAEF calculated daily combat consumption to be 41 pounds per soldier. Maps for D-Day reached 3,000 tons. And many other maps that detailed cultural and public places that were not to be destroyed were also created. Operation Overlord would gather 8,000 doctors, 600,000 doses of penicillin, 50 tons of sulfa, 800,000 pints of blood, which totaled 1,600 pallets weighing half a ton each, which are calculated to be enough medical supplies to last the medics 2 weeks. Camo was a large factor in keeping the true amount of forces away from the enemy. SHAEF concluded that the invasion would fail even if the enemy had 48 hours' notice. A ban kept the usual 60,000 monthly visitors away from many coastal beaches. 2,000 counterintelligence officers sniffed for leaks, and sensors reviewed all outgoing mail, and on May 25th, all mail was impounded for 10 days as a precaution. 1 million square yards of net camo were used to cover tents and huts, and even medical stretchers and lockers had to be painted with toned-down paint. Any vehicle that was stopped for more than 10 minutes had to be covered and propped to make the vehicle unrecognizable from air surveillance. Codename Fortitude was a deception force for enemies to gain incorrect messages and info in order to confuse and direct the enemy to make strategic dispositions of forces. This also helped find German agents who were eventually all found and captured after believing several traps SHAEF officials used against them. And with the deceptions working, Eisenhower learned that there was no evidence that the enemy has accurately assessed the area in which the main assault was to be made. At 4:30 a.m. on Sunday, June 4th, Eisenhower met with many senior officers, including Trafford Lee Mallory and Captain J.M. Stagg, SHAEF's chief meteorologist. Winds and a new storm that were going over the channel was going to cause the invasion to be delayed, going from most unpromising to quite impossible. But later that day, Stagg ran in and told Eisenhower that the winds were fading, and with one last meeting, they decided to go. Thank you for watching my short documentary. I wish I had more time to put in everything else, but I just don't. Thank you again for watching. I hope it wasn't super boring, and have a good day.